Let's see. Okay, so I need you guys to take this pink paper that you have, and I want you to flip to the side that says, what does the future hold for captive animals now? So that's the side that we want to be on. And what we're doing here is we are using this as an exemplar. So you might recognize the topic. This is from the last writing prompt, so it's the animals in captivity one. And we'll find out what this student author had to say about that particular prompt in just a minute. But I also want to remind you about your annotation tools and your bookmark. And so, we're going to use these tools as we go through here and mark up this student's essay to try to figure out what's going on in here that we think works really well. What are some things we can learn from this particular student writer? Now, a couple of things to keep in mind is that the writing is not necessarily perfect, and that's okay. It was basically a rough draft that you guys wrote during the last writing prompt, and I took that student's response, and there were a lot of great things about it, so I decided to type it up, and that's why we're looking at it today, okay? So as I'm making marks up here, you guys should also be making marks on your page according to your own thinking and your observations and what you notice. And in fact, I may even pause to give you guys some time to think quietly about what you notice, and I'll be working on mine at the same time. But anyway, to go back to our annotation marks on our bookmark, we have the cloud that goes around tricky words, but then maybe also around words that we think are significant or important for some kind of reason or whatever. So I'm just putting that on there to kind of remind myself, and if you want to do the same, you're welcome to. And then we're underlining important ideas, but not too long, right? Not too many. We want to make sure that we're underlining just small portions so that we're not overdoing it, so that way we'll actually be able to recognize what we thought was important versus what's not as important. So not too much, just enough. It's kind of like the Goldilocks rule, you know? And then, what questions do you have? So if you have questions about some things that you see in this student's writing, you would put a question mark next to it, and then you would write down whatever your question is and kind of show your thinking and think through it. If there's anything that surprises you in this particular student's piece of writing, you would put an exclamation point next to that part, and then you would also comment on why it was surprising to you. And then finally, this arrow, we remember from yesterday, it's where we're connecting to important ideas. And then I would write down what my connection is. And another reminder, if you flip your bookmarks over for just a second, you're going to remember that we're focusing on critical thinking elements that we can use as we interact with the text. So we're looking at information. We are able to make assumptions, which are basically gut feelings or hunches about what we're looking at. We can make inferences based on what we're seeing, which means that we're taking the information and the information makes us think something or leads us in a particular direction. Or we can ask questions to help us clarify our thinking. So let's go ahead and let's get started. And so with this student, I took the name off, right, because we want to protect everybody's privacy. But obviously, I think very highly of this piece, and the student did some great things in here. So with the title, what does the future hold for captive animals now? First off, one thing that I should make a note of is that the fact that there is a title. Title. Lovely. Okay? It is so nice that a student is using a title to kind of capture the essence of what they decided to write about. Now, here's the thing though. I am wondering, based on this word, captive, when I think of the word captive, I'm thinking, gee, that doesn't sound too friendly. That doesn't sound too nice, right? So I'm wondering, does this mean the student is against zoos and sea parks and all those kinds of things, or not? I don't know. So I guess I'm going to find out in just a minute. And then when I start looking in here, I'm just going to read it aloud, and then you guys just follow along. With stories like Blackfish and others that focus on the cruelty of keeping animals captive, it is easy to stereotype all captive animals, bless you, as sad, lonely, and violent. But this is not the case. couple of things that I'm going to notice in here first. I really like this. Ooh, stereotype. My goodness. Okay. This word has a lot of feeling behind it. It seems like this student is going to be arguing something, which I like. This is not the case. Okay? So I'm getting a sense of what the student's viewpoint is right away too. Sense of viewpoint. Do you also notice how the tone in this student's writing, it sounds very formal, right? But they are making a point. They are going after it. They are being deliberate in their choice of words and really crafting it nicely here. So, tone, bravo, I like, okay? With the right conditions, it is okay to keep animals in captivity. All right, so kind of reiterating what they were saying up there, just making it very clear. For instance, in Wild Animals, A Life of Captivity and the Future of Zoos, the text states that many animals find the presence of humans unthreatening, uninteresting, or even enjoyable. Okay, what I notice here is I'm just gonna, and I know it's not part of our annotation tools, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit, just a little, I can't help it. It happens, right? I am going to circle those quotation marks because here I'm noticing, and I'll underline it too, I am noticing that this student is referring back to the source. And what kind of effect do you think that has on the writing? How does that make the writing seem to you? What's that?
It backs it up better.
Yeah, they are using information to support their point, right? And it does back it up better. It makes us go, oh, this student really knows something about this topic. This student did some reading on this. Go you, nice job. And then I also notice more quotation marks here. And and so basically the student is referring to where this information is coming from, and then they include a piece of evidence that supports their point. Okay, so that is very nice. We want to be using evidence to support our thinking on something to show that, hey, this person really knows what they're talking about. What this tells us is that captive animals are at ease with their surroundings and therefore calm and not paranoid about what is around them. Now I gotta say, this student is doing an excellent job when it comes to word choice because it seems like they're throwing in certain words that elevate the tone and make it sound like they really know what they're talking about. So I am going to put a little cloud around ease. This whole thing of surroundings. They could have just said, animals are comfortable at the zoo, right? But they didn't do that. And therefore, calm. Okay, I really like this part too. And I'm going to cheat again because I'm clouding two words right there. And not paranoid about what is around them. Paranoid is also a strong word. It has a strong suggestion to it, and I like the flavor there. Nice. All right. Another strong piece of evidence from the text was that the zoo is able to recreate enough of the culture of the wilderness for a wild animal to live comfortably. Okay? So again, I'm just going to underline this, another strong piece of evidence, right? So we know this student is using evidence to support their point. And then here it is. We have the quotation marks again, so we know it's coming directly from the text. But also notice, okay, I'm adding my little exclamation point for something that doesn't quite surprise me, but it just kind of reminds me, like, yeah, good job, go you, because the quote is not too long. It seems like it's a manageable length in order for the student to really go after it and discuss it, right? Now, this is important because it shows that captive animals are in a very similar habitat as the wild, for less stress on the animal, and so the animal can adapt easily and live as if it were in the wild. Okay. This whole thing about the less stress on the animal thing, this student is showing me that they're really thinking it through, and it does sound like they are working to prove their point. Now, if I go back to the beginning and I look at the point just to kind of remind myself, I go, okay, with stories like Blackfish and others that focus on the cruelty of keeping animals captive, it is easy to stereotype all captive animals as sad, lonely, and violent. But this is not the case. With the right conditions, it is okay to keep the animals in captivity. You know, here's another thing that I'm noticing right now, is that really, this point kind of goes over 2 sentences. What do you guys think about that?
Works for them.
It does work in this case, right? So we've got, it surprises me, because normally you think of a point as being just 1 sentence, but this student is showing it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? So I'm going to write a point can be 2 sentences. It might be, right? Or it might just be 1 sentence. It kind of depends on the situation. Because our writing isn't always so formulaic, right? Sometimes we can play around with things, we can get a little bit sophisticated. And even though we know a general pattern of how things go, and the fact that yes, I need evidence, and yes, I need to analyze that evidence, and yes, I should have a point, you do get to play with it a little bit. It doesn't always have to be quite so, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. So here's what I'm going to have you guys do. We have just like maybe bottom third of this thing. I'd like you guys to go ahead and take a few minutes on your own to just kind of go through the rest of this and make a note as to what do you observe that this student is doing that you're going, yeah, nice job.